Hello, Opportunity Fund grantees, and welcome to this very important session about exams. So this is information that we somewhat covered in Armenia in our workshop. However, it's important to review it and also hopefully give you guys a bit of new information as well. We're going to talk today about just a couple topics related to exams. We're going to talk about English exams like the TOEFL and the IELTS, and then other exams or general knowledge exams, which are going to be different options for undergraduates and then for graduates. And we'll be very clear in this webinar if you are an undergraduate student, which exams you should focus on, and if you're a graduate student, which will be your exams. And then we'll finish with some general recommendations about taking exams and where to go from here. But exams in general are just, as we talked about in Armenia, really important in your process. And this is one reason for this is because they are a standardized measure that helps the universities in the US to compare you with students from around the world and students from the US in the cases of the general knowledge exams. Because there are many different types of educational systems around the world, in Colombia we have universities that go for 5 years, but in other countries they may have an undergraduate program for 4 years or for 6 years maybe. On the high school level, you guys who are applying for undergraduate study are going to finish 11th grade, and in the US and in other countries maybe they go through 12th grade. So they're important because they are this standardized measure. They are important for both your admissions process into the programs and into the universities, but also for the financial aid. They are often a determining factor in getting financial aid when they are comparing outstanding students like you guys with other outstanding students from other parts of the world. So for that reason alone, we really need to focus on scoring high points, both on the English exams and on the other general exams, and really focus on the preparation. And that is what we're going to talk about today, how we can start with this process and which steps we need to take starting now. And as we talked about as well, exams, we know they aren't always the best measure of your intelligence. It's a standardized exams, and some people are better at those exams than others. So the idea is that everyone has the tools necessary to be able to be successful on these exams and therefore get a successful admission decision and successful financial aid offers from these universities. The first exam we're going to talk about is the TOEFL exam. And this is an exam that measures your English level. It's one measure of an English level. And this exam should be both for undergraduate and graduate students. So everyone listening to this session needs to prepare and present the exam. It's an exam that's taken on the computer, a computer-based test. And from the date of the exam, it's valid for 2 years. I know some of you have already taken the TOEFL, but the idea is that you will retake it, hopefully to get a higher score, and also because the validity of the exam may not last through your admissions process. This exam measures the 4 main skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And the scoring system for this exam goes from 0 to 120. So that means that each section is worth 30 points, each of the 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And for each of those scores, you will get a score that goes from 0 to 30 for a total of 120. Many universities will have a minimum requirement. So they will say in order to get admission, you will need an 80 or a 90 or a 100 on the exam. And this is going to depend a lot based on whether or not you are undergraduate or graduate, and also based on your area of study sometimes. So for the graduate students, undergraduate universities often ask for anywhere between an 80 and a 100. 90 can be a common, 100, but the idea is that everyone be aiming for at least a 100 on this exam. With a 100, you will be doing very well and you will meet the majority of the requirements for admission in that university. For graduate programs, for those of you applying in areas like TESOL and teaching English as a second language, you will really need to aim for 100 because that's going to be very important for your admissions and financial aid process. In other graduate programs, we see requirements of anywhere from a 90 to a 100 generally. So that's kind of your ballpark where you should aim. This is an exam that all international students must take, independent of the country, except for countries who have a native language of English. But you will be taking this exam along with your future classmates from all over the world. And one thing we'd like to mention is also your English preparation versus your test preparation. So we know that you all speak English, we know that you have high levels of English, and now it's important that you start preparing for the specific exam if you haven't already. I know many of you have, but you start with these preparation courses online or in person in the Colombo, depending on what the offering is at your specific Colombo, that you start with the books and the practice exams. We talked a lot in Armenia about how important it is to take practice exams, and that we want to emphasize that here as well, because if you sit down for the 3.5 or 4 hours of the test, you will really get a sense of what it's going to be like, the stamina that you need and the energy that you need to be able to do just as well as when you're finishing the exam as you were when you started, because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You're going to be sitting for a long period of time, and you really need to keep your attention up. So that's why practice exams are so important, because if you sit for those hours taking your exam, that helps you to prepare for the specific day of the exam and the same conditions that you will be faced with. So many of you may have seen this page before. This is the home page of the TOEFL exam. It's administered by an organization called ETS. So you want to visit ets.org/TOEFL, and you can go to the part that's signaled on the screen. And you'll be able to log in or create an account. So if you have an account already, if you've taken the exam and your account is still active, you can go to the returning user section. If you've never taken the exam or your account might be inactive, you can go to the sign up section, the new user. Your goal is going to be to create a profile, and then you will need to create a password that goes with your account. Our recommendation is to create a password that is not something that's private and accessible to all of your other bank accounts and email accounts. We want it to be something that you feel okay to send to us, because in case we sometimes need to get into your account to send a score at the last minute or to make a change, it's important that your advisor has access to your account with your password and your email address, or your username rather. Again, that means that we don't want you to send a very private password that will get into all of your accounts, but create something that might be unique just to this TOEFL account. You can fill out this profile. It'll take a few minutes, but it's important that you put all of your information and that you make sure it's your name and your date of birth, your country, that those categories are accurate, because this is information that will be used then on your score report. Speaking of the score report, this is what it looks like. So once you take the exam, within 2 weeks, you will get this online report. And this has the categories that we mentioned earlier of reading, listening, speaking, and writing, and a corresponding score that goes with each exam, or excuse me, each section. And then below, there will be a description of the score, your point range, and then what someone who scores within that range is generally capable of doing in terms of English language expression. So for undergraduate students, the exams that you will need to be taking are either the SAT exam or the ACT exam. This is, again, for your undergraduate students. There are the 4 of you who will be applying for undergraduate study. These are exams that measure, let's say, general knowledge. So we're going to be measuring essentially skills in math and quantitative areas, skills in reading comprehension, and more qualitative areas. Then there's a writing section. That's for the SAT. And then there are very similar sections for the ACT. The sections are English, mathematics, reading, and science. And so these exams are similar exams, and the decision of which exam to take is up to you guys, working with your advisors. It will depend a lot on the offering of the test dates and the test availability here in Columbia. So we've seen in the past that the SAT has more kind of coverage within Columbia, but this is something that you can talk about with each of your advisors. For the SAT, the scoring is from, there's a mistake on this slide, we apologize, 400 to 1,600. We're missing just a 0 there. That is the sum of the 2 main sections, which are scored up to 800 points, from 200 to 800. And then the writing section is a section that's kind of considered apart. It goes from 2 to 8 points. In the SAT, you will receive a composite score that goes from 1 to 36. So for international testing, remember that there are limited dates, cities, and spots, limited cupos. And so it's really, really important to register early. It's also important when you're looking with your advisors at these dates that you be sure to look at the international test dates, because for these exams, there may be more tests offered in the US, but for the international opportunities, there are fewer dates available. So it's very, very important to check out the international sections of these websites, and also look at the where the closest test center is to you. So maybe that means some of you might have to travel for both these exams, and then when we'll talk in just a bit about the graduate exam, it means that some of you may have to travel to another city, and that's totally fine. Remember, that's all covered by Education USA Opportunity Fund money, and you'll need to coordinate in advance with your advisor. That's the most important thing. So all of that information was about something that's called the SAT General Test and the ACT. There's also something for you undergraduate students that you will probably be required or asked to take by your universities, and it's called the SAT Subject Test. And this is something that is more specific about an area of study. What universities often say is that you need to take the SAT General Test and then 2 or 3 subject tests, but they do not determine a specific subject. You can choose which subject you want depending on the opportunities that are available on that testing date. So you can take up to 3 of these subject tests, which last 1 hour each, during one testing date. But it's important to note that you cannot take the subject tests and a general test on the same date. So for those of you who will be taking the SAT, undergraduate students, these are the dates that are scheduled for this fall, for 2018. And so this is the plan that we recommend for you. So because of the limited dates, you would take the general exam on October 6th. You would take your subject tests on November 3rd. And then 1 month later, on December 1st, you would take again the SAT General Test. And this is important because this has 2 dates for you to take the general exam. We really recommend this schedule because this will be in time to be able to apply to the deadlines for your universities and the deadlines that we have for opportunity funds. So note also that the registration deadline is minimum 1 month before the exam. So the registration closes in early September for this first exam that will take place in October. However, if the cupos are gone, then there is not an opportunity and you may have to travel to another city. So the recommendation for the students and the advisors is to register as early as possible. And we can start that process even starting now, starting very soon. Okay, so changing groups now. For the undergraduate students, that was your other exam will be the SAT or the ACT. For graduate students, the vast majority of you will need to take an exam called the GRE. So this exam measures 3 different areas. There's a verbal reasoning section, or kind of reading comprehension and analyzing reading and texts. There's a quantitative reasoning section, which is basically mathematics, and there's an analytical writing section. The verbal reasoning and the quantitative sections are measured from 130 to 170 points. And the sum of that score is going to be kind of your most important score. The analytical writing section is still important. It's scored from 0 to 6 in increments of 0.5. And that's generally reported apart. That's not added in or summed into the score. That's a sum of the verbal and quantitative. This exam is administered by ETS, as is the TOEFL. It's also administered in computer, and it's valid for up to 5 years. And it's worth mentioning that this exam is necessary and required for the majority of graduate candidates, and this is independent of whether or not you are an international student or a student from the US. People have to take this in all areas of study. Some exceptions that we see frequently are students who are applying to programs called LLM, which is a master's in law. It's for lawyers. And some music programs also do not require the GRE. However, apart from that, it's really something that is requested or required in areas that range from chemistry to TESOL to psychology. It's important for the same reasons the TOEFL is important, because it's a standard measure of certain skills that can be compared with other students' skills from around the world. And so for that reason, it's very, very important to also take this exam seriously. As is the case with the SAT, the GRE also has some subject tests. However, they're not as required or as common as in other areas. It may be required in the case of a program in the hard sciences or the biological sciences. You see here that these subjects are physics and math, chemistry, biology, really focused more so on the sciences. However, this is something that you'll have to look at with each university that you are interested in applying to see if they require the GRE subject test. These are some of the test centers and test dates. Sorry, not dates, the test centers that are available in Colombia. And some of you, specifically in the Eje Cafetero, may have to travel to take the GRE. There are quite a few dates available in the major cities, in the principal cities. However, some of those dates might have a very small number of spots. So some of these test centers might just have 5 computers that they use to take the exam. And so once those spots are full, the date is closed. And so again, for that reason, it's quite important to register in advance and also to keep checking the system. You're going to want to also create a username and password for the GRE test on the ETS system. ETS sometimes lets you use your same password to enter both. I've had a problem with this in the past, but You can try to use the password you created for the TOEFL account to enter to the GRE page, but it may be necessary to create another username and login. A couple other things to mention about the GRE exam. So this is an exam that sometimes will appear on the university websites for your graduate programs as an optional exam. But remember, if it's optional, we still need you guys to take the exam. It might not be required for admissions purposes, but to get any type of financial aid, it's almost always a factor in the process. And so it's very important that if the university page says it's optional for you guys as Opportunity Fund grantees, it is a requirement, because remember, we are looking for also the option of full financial aid, and that generally comes with this exam. Also, it's very rare that the university will ask for a minimum score on the GRE. What we see more commonly is that they will put an average. So they say, you know, our average GRE score, or the middle 50% last year got between a 305 and a 310, which would be the combined score of verbal and quantitative. And if that information isn't available on the website of the university, you might want to write to the office of the program, the person who's the graduate assistant, or the person who deals with the administrative tasks of your specific program, and ask if that information is available. If they have the information about the GRE scores of admitted students from the last year or the past couple years, because that's good information that can give you a ballpark, give you a goal. But remember, we're trying to get above that average. We always want to be above that benchmark and then be able to be much more competitive for financial aid purposes. So a few recommendations that we have for you guys. Prepare for the exams. Take your simulacros, take your mock exams, and just dedicate a little bit of time each day, or every other day at this point, to your preparation. And it's not up to your advisor to determine what that time is. You guys know best what works for you. Maybe it's set aside half an hour before you go to work or before you go to school in the morning to do flashcards for the TOEFL, or to learn some new words, or to do some math problems in the case of the SAT or the GRE. But it's up to you to determine that best time. Maybe you work best at night, and so you want to set aside a little bit of time before you go to bed, or during dinner, or during your free time in the evenings. But the idea is that you study at the time that you best retain and absorb the information. Another recommendation is that you start to follow the social media accounts of ETS and College Board, which administers the SAT, on your Facebook or on your other accounts, because this will help you keep this topic present during the day. It will help you to be aware of any changes in the exams, and it will help you to be aware if there are any resources that you might not have known about. Also, it's important now to create your accounts on the different websites and then explore these websites. There really are a lot of free resources there, and mock exams or even practice questions that you could use, and take advantage of those resources. We talked about this a little bit, but the dates for specifically the TOEFL and the GRE exams are dynamic, and the spots fill up. So the SAT exams and the ACT exams, their dates are concrete. Their dates are fixed, and they are set around the world. So everyone in the world are taking these exams on the same day. However, the GRE and the TOEFL are more flexible. So be sure to check the websites often, and then to register in advance. So the registration process, again, takes place through your advisors. So talk to your advisors about how that process should take place, about what's the minimum time in advance they need to be able to process a credit card payment. Maybe it's easier if you want to use a credit card that you have or one of a friend's and then be reimbursed with the Colombo. That's not always an option with all Colombo, so it's important that, again, you speak with your specific advisor about what the best registration procedures are in your case. And then for the day of the exam, remember to plan your transportation. That's a stress that we just want to take off your shoulders. You don't need to be stressed about arriving on public transit, on a bus, because we all know things can happen, and we really don't want you to be late for this exam. So speak with your advisor about how you can get a driver, or if there's someone from the Colombo that can take you. And some of these test centers aren't located directly in the city, so it may be easier. For example, the one in Bogota is a bit to the north of the city, and so it's important that you have a driver, a trustworthy driver that can take you. Just as a final reminder, so these tests really are important for admissions purposes and also to get financial support. Then your preparation is going to be fundamental to earn a good score. And it is fundamental that you start your preparation in advance. So start your preparation now. Our goals are going to be that you will be taking the TOEFL exam around September. And remember that with the program, we cover one TOEFL exam. And so it's very important that you really do your preparation thoroughly, and that you put a good faith effort into your preparation. And then later in the year, you'll be taking your other standardized exams that will be equally as important for your process. So that was our brief overview about exams. And again, we ask that you now meet with your advisors to start talking about both your preparation plan, what will be your test prep. Will it be online? Will it be in person? Are there any extra books that you need that we need to order? And then that you start talking about the registration procedures and what's the policy and what's the process with your specific Colombo. So thank you so much, and we look forward to receiving any questions that you have. Have a great day.